Welcome back to another edition of the PFF podcast. I'm Mike Renner, joined as always by Sam Monson. And last week, Sam and I wrapped up the NFC Win Projections total. If you go to the website right now, profootballfocus.com, Nathan Yankee has his statistical analysis that spit out from our data win projection totals for every team in the NFL this year. Last week we covered the NFC, went over that. If you want, check it out on the podcast. And this week we'll be doing the AFC on the website now, starting right at the top with the Super Bowl champions, New England Patriots. They're again projected to have the best season in our data, projected for the best season in Vegas as well. We have them at 12 wins. Vegas has them at 12.5. Sam, where do you have them?
I think that's just the default for where you put New England for this entire Brady-Belichick era, isn't it? They're going to win 12 games. They're going to win their division. They're probably going to get to the AFC Championship game minimum, and that's it. That's your standard New England season. The interesting, I quickly Googled AFC projections, PFF, looking for this article before, and the first one I clicked on was last year's projections. And we were 1-2. The same two teams are the top two teams for 2 years in a row with Nathan's projections. So actually, last year he had them flipped. Last year Nathan had the Pittsburgh Steelers at 13-3. Didn't quite get there, but they were the number 2 team, or the number 1 team last year with the Patriots number 2, and this year he's got them. He's got the Steelers at number 2 and New England number 1. Yeah, I mean. Like I say, that's your standard New England season. That's kind of as you'd imagine. I kind of lean towards Vegas, and then ridiculously, I think you probably lean the over with New England and 12 wins.
No, I can't disagree with you there. Usually, you worry about the high win totals. You worry about the fact that all it takes is one injury, a quarterback getting hurt for a few games, and all of a sudden, that team that should have could have easily won 13 games with their starting quarterback wins 10, 11, but I don't even think you worry about that with New England because Tom Brady goes down. Jimmy Garoppolo, we saw last year, stepped in right away, and they still won. They still would win with him on the field. So I don't think that even applies to the Patriots. I would bet the over if I had to in this one. I'm not going to probably, but at the end of the day, I think the Patriots are winning 13 to 14 games again this year.
Yeah, I mean, this was they're the Super Bowl champions. They had maybe the best roster in the game last year. If anything, they've improved in the offseason. I mean, the Patriots should be a scary prospect for the rest of the NFL.
Yeah, that's the thing. They get Rob Gronkowski back. They added Stephon Gilmore. While they did lose Logan Ryan, I think I'd call that an upgrade over Logan Ryan getting Stephon Gilmore.
Well, the big thing there was not losing Malcolm Butler. They added Stephon Gilmore and kept Butler in town.
Yes, and really the only hole on this roster, you look from top to bottom, the biggest weakness is the fact that they don't really have talented edge rushers. They have a fairly solid interior, but no real guy who can rush it off the edge, and that didn't affect them last year. It didn't hurt them last year. They still had one of the best defenses in the NFL. Even with that, I wrote about how during the Super Bowl run they counteract that by only rushing those interior guys about 25% of the time. They'll drop 8 into coverage and only let those 3 guys get after the passer. So really, I don't think if everyone stays healthy, if this luck doesn't bounce their way injury wise, I think they win more than 12.5 games for sure.
Yeah, they don't have good edge rushers, and they're one of the few teams that doesn't really need good edge rushers because they're very good at scheming pressure from other areas. When you look at this Patriots team, actually, it's a lot like what people gave Rex Ryan credit for back when he had a really good defense, before when we actually expected it from him. Rex Ryan typically didn't have good edge rushers, but he was able to scheme pressure on the blitz from inside linebackers and from defensive backs. And when you look at where the Patriots were generating their pressure, obviously there's some guys up front like Trey Flowers that were getting pressure up the middle, But a guy like Dante Hightower is getting a huge amount of pressure on the blitz from his inside linebacker spot.
An edge rusher, and they do use him in that role. He's probably their best edge rusher, even though he plays inside linebacker.
He generated 25 pressures last year. They had defensive backs that were generating 10 total pressures last year, on the blitz. So they can get pressure from a whole variety of different places that you're not necessarily expecting it to come from. And if you're able to get pressure that's coming from weird angles and surprising people, that in and of itself is having an effect that you expect, an overwhelming amount of volume of pressure coming off the edge to have. It's that kind of doubt in the quarterback's mind that he has to think and hesitate for a second, worrying about where something might be coming. So they do have holes there on edge rusher, but they're one of the few teams I think that's perfectly set up for it not to matter.
And they also, I will say, did address it in the draft, adding Derek Rivers in the 3rd round, Dietrich Wise in the 4th. I think both those guys can get after the passer, add some more, at least are going to be upgrades from what they had a year ago. So they still could have something in the way of edge pressure. So, like I said, if you're looking to poke holes in this roster, I'm not sure where you're poking holes. Like, it's just that they should be the favorite to win the Super Bowl yet again because of how good they are top to bottom. The only way I could see it is if Tom Brady really falls off a cliff and they feel obligated to play him because of, who he is, the fact that he has 5 Super Bowl rings. That would be the only way I could see them really going far under this 12-win total that we have them at.
And the only thing about that is that it probably is going to happen at some point. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I'm not the person that's going to predict when this cliff for Tom Brady is coming. Yeah, because I already did, and I'm about 3 years out of date so far. But it is going to happen. Every single quarterback at some point hits this physical wall once they get up in age. And Brady is at the age, with Peyton Manning and Brett Favre, that it has happened before, even for quarterbacks that have lasted for a crazy amount of time. So at some point, he's going to physically hit this wall where he's not able to do what he was able to do before, whether it's the way it hit Manning and it became like he was physically no longer able to make the same plays that he made before, or whether it happens the way it hit Favre, where he just became brittle. It killed his durability more than his ability to actually play the game. Like, at some point, it's going to hit Brady.
Yeah, for sure. That's, like I said, the only way I can see that being the case. On to the next team, as you mentioned, the Pittsburgh Steelers. We have them at 11 wins. Vegas has them at 10.5. Truthfully, I would bet the under on this one.
Ooh, cool on Pittsburgh.
And this one more has to do with the injury concerns and the fact that Roethlisberger legitimately took a step backwards last year at 35 years old. Like we mentioned with Eli Manning on last week's podcast, this is the age that quarterbacks used to start trending downwards. That we used to expect this sort of decline. And Roethlisberger legitimately took a step back last season. Maybe some of that was due to injuries, but at this age, again, he's not a guy who's been completely, he's been nicked up a lot over the course of his career. He hasn't been Mr. Durability. Those injuries start to catch up, and he was thinking about retiring this offseason because of that. I'm just not sure that he's going to be, the Roethlisberger that we've come to expect this season.
I guess the thing with him is that he's always bounced around a little bit in terms of how good he's been, the consistency and the kind of overall ability, where Eli has been trending down consistently for a few years now, basically since that ridiculous 2011 season. Like, since 2011, where he won the Super Bowl, where he was phenomenal against pressure. It's been a steady downward trend in terms of grading and in terms of performance in that time. Roethlisberger is a year removed from the best season of his career, and it was just a big step back in 2016. So, I think he could take he could head continually in that direction. Like you say, he's had durability issues. He is reaching that age, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if he completely bounced back and we saw another, ridiculously good Roethlisberger season next year. And if that happens, they're still really well set up in terms of skill position guys. And that offensive line was the best line in the game for the second half of that season and into the playoffs. So potentially that offense could be phenomenal. You have the best offensive line in the game. If it plays to that level, you've got Antonio Brown still, you've got Le'Veon Bell, you've got Roethlisberger if he bounces back. There's a lot of weapons there to play with. It could be the offense that we were expecting it to be last year when Nathan had them winning 13 games. And I think the defense is still where I think all the question marks are, but some of their young players, I think I was encouraged by the end of the season. I wasn't high at all on Artie Burns as a first round pick, but Artie Burns started to get it towards the end of the year, started to play a little bit better. So that I think is the big question mark. This offense could be fantastic, but the defense, I don't know if it's going to be much better than average, but then it always seems to play a little bit better than the sum of its parts.
That is true. I agree on that somehow they always seem to at least not have a bad defense. You know, no matter what it looks like on paper, they always seem to come out at least average to above average defensively. I do worry, though, about, and it was their biggest issue, I think, last year, just edge pressure. If James Harris is not in the field, there's really no one off the edge that can get after the passer, and it affected them, I think, more than it affected the Patriots, like we just mentioned, them not having any edge pressure.
Do you buy the crap that they were peddling about James Harrison having been basically kept fresh for the playoffs last year? They were like, oh, you know, we knew we'd be contending. We knew that James Harrison only had, you know, X amount of gas in the tank, so we kept the powder dry over the first half of the season, then we unleashed him for the playoff run.
I do. I think so.
Really?
I actually do.
That struck me as kind of, let's put some PR spin on basically giving the starting job to two younger guys who weren't able to get it done, and then we'll throw James Harrison back in there, and it turns out he's still got plenty left in the tank at 38 years old or whatever he is.
That is the thing. I think that is why I kind of believe it, because he is just so old. Like, he's going to be 39 this season. You just can't risk having one of your best defensive players not healthy when, like they said, that is a roster that you think is going to make the playoffs. So you can't just 38-year-olds don't make it through full seasons like that. They can't play thousands of snaps like he used to back in the day. So I think to some degree I believe that, and I think they will have to do that again this year because he's all they have off the edge. I don't see those other guys taking massive steps forward to where you don't need him and won't be relying on him come playoff time.
If that was true, I don't think they would have given him a starting job back, at least until the playoffs, or at least maybe, you know, week 17 or whatever. They wouldn't have put him on the line until it really mattered, whereas he got handed that starting job back at what, like week 11 he got it back?
Well, they weren't necessarily in like locks to make the playoffs at that point was the thing. They were they were fighting for their life all the way till week 17. Him in. So
that's very early to be putting him back in as a guy that you're right. We need to deploy James Harrison now full time.
I will say
on the line.
I will say though, the interior of that defensive line has potential to be very good this season. Cameron Hayward coming back healthy. Stephon Tuitt took a big step forward last season, and Javon Hargrave showed enough as a rookie at nose tackle to where he could make a second-year leap into being one of the better nose tackles in the NFL. At that point, I think they have a fairly solid three-man front up there where it might not necessarily matter if they're getting a ton of edge pressure because they'll be pushing the pocket consistently. So I will say that to me is not as concerning. Like I said, the biggest concern for me for the Steelers is Roethlisberger. That's why I'm not confident in our 11-win projection.
Yeah, I think it's the right kind of ballpark. It does seem perhaps a little bit rich given the holes on defense. Just I don't trust that defense to be that good. But I could see them winning 11.
All right, one more team we have winning 11. It is the Oakland Raiders. Derek Carr, back healthy, highest paid player in NFL history. Vegas has them at 10, though. I think Vegas was pretty low on them last year as well, had them at something like 7, and they ended up winning far more than that. 10, Sam, where do you see them ending up?
How many did they win last year? What did they end up with?
Was it 12 or 11 or 12? I gotta look that one up.
I mean, this was arguably the second best team in the conference last season until Derek Carr went down. So, you know, if you get Derek Carr back exactly the way he was last year, or even better if he takes a step forward, there's still room for improvement there. I mean, this, again, it's kind of like the Steelers we just talked about. That offense is potentially so good. They've got one of the better offensive lines in the game. Derek Carr was playing phenomenally, had a great kind of partnership with Crabtree and with Amari Cooper. That offense could be spectacular, and then it's just a case of what the defense can do. And what they have that the Steelers don't have is Khalil Mack, who is, it's one-man edge pressure. I mean, that's one of the Defensive Player of the Year caliber players, led the NFL last season with 96 total pressures. He's a guy who on his own can get as much pressure as several teams' entire edge rushing groups can. So that gives them something that a team like the Steelers don't have, and gives them the ability to get to that level. I think there's no reason that this team shouldn't win more games than that, get to the same kind of level as they did last year.
I definitely agree. I don't see how 10 seems just incredibly low to me. I get that there are issues still defensively. That linebacking core is a little worrisome. The secondary, they will need, Gary and Conley to step in and play right away, most likely in that secondary, and start right away to just complete that roster. But offensively, this is one of the most talented rosters in all football. I mean, if Derek Carr continues at the upward trajectory that he's been at, if he takes another step forward next year, this could be the best offense in the NFL. That's how good the offensive line is. That's how good, the wide receiving core is, adding Jared Cook, having Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree. And then if Marshawn Lynch is anything close to the old Marshawn Lynch, it just gets scary. They can basically beat you in any sort of way they want to. So, yeah, 10 wins just seems low to me in Vegas. I bet the over on them last year. I'd bet it again this year.
Yeah, I'm on board with that.
All right, on to the only team that we have projected in the AFC to win 10 games. And a bit of a surprise, but it's not surprising if you've listened to me talk at all on this podcast over the past couple of months, and it's the Los Angeles Chargers, 10 wins. Not the Chiefs, not the Broncos in the AFC West, the Chargers. Vegas has them at only 7.5, and you know where I'm saying on this.
When we were putting together our roster kind of rankings spreadsheets for this ESPN thing that we were doing, which actually should be out today, I think, on ESPN.com, we put together all this data based on the grading of all these guys and started collecting it all by the end of it. And the Chargers kept coming out ridiculously high. And I kept looking for reasons that they should be lower, but the roster overall is actually in really good shape. And it's just the offensive line, which, I mean, it's been terrible for years, but it does at least have the potential to be better. Okung should be an upgrade, albeit not a particularly great one, at left tackle. Matt Slauson should be a good left guard. Forrest Lamp, if he's anything like how we've been hyping him up over the offseason, should be a huge upgrade at right guard and then potentially at right tackle if he ever gets that shot. Joe Barksdale played very badly last year, but has 3 seasons of pretty good play before that in his recent history. So you would expect him, I guess, to be better. So that should be 4/5 of the offensive line upgraded over a season ago, at which point it shouldn't be the disaster it was, and the Achilles heel to this entire roster. And once you get beyond that, there's not that much to dislike.
I definitely agree. I mean, I 100% agree. I've been banging the drum for them all off season. I think they are very much like the Oakland Raiders last year, where just everything's trending in the right direction for them. So many reasons to think that they'll take a drastic step forward from a season ago. You get Keenan Allen back healthy. That's a legit number 1 receiver getting back healthy. You draft Mike Williams in the top 10, who could come in and have an impact right away. Even if he isn't, you still have Travis Benjamin and Dontrell Inman, and Hunter Henry. You still have a very solid receiving core there. And then on the other side of the ball, Jason Verrett back healthy. That's a legit number 1 cornerback getting back healthy. Him across from Casey Hayward is a very solid secondary. There's just so many reasons why this team should take the next step. But like you mentioned, offensive line, none of it works if Phillip Rivers is on his back every play like he was a season ago. None of it works if Phillip Rivers doesn't have more than 2.5 seconds to get rid of the ball. So it should be better, but like I've said before, I'll believe it when I see it. They're for the Chargers. I think the fact that they moved out of San Diego might reverse the curse on the offensive line. Let's hope it does.
I think also the other thing working against them is it's still a pretty tough division, even with Denver slipping down. They've got to go against Oakland, who we've just talked up as being worth better than 11 wins. They're going to go against Kansas City, who have been a playoff contender the past few seasons. So that at least is 4 games that are going to be tough, plus another 2 against a very good defense, if not a great offense in Denver.
Yeah, it's very much like we mentioned with the NFC South a week ago. Someone's just going to have a bad season in that division because you can't have 4 teams all winning, 9 or 10 games. That almost never happens. So someone's going to fall off the wagon. I'm not sure which one's going to be. I mean, I'm going to say who it is, my opinion on who it will be later, but I don't think it's going to be the Chargers unless injuries strike drastically for the, 3rd to 4th straight season for them.
Yeah, I don't trust them getting to double-digit wins, put it that way.
Oh, okay, you're wrong. All right, on to the Kansas City Chiefs, another member of the AFC West. We have them at 9. Vegas has them at 9. The rare agreement, where do you have them at?
Yeah, if I was going to lean either side of that, I think I might give them the double-digit wins, but it would only be 10. I wouldn't be going any higher than that. I think 9 is about the right kind of ballpark. I think it's a pretty good team. They have enough flaws that I think I can see why nobody's particularly keen on going any higher. But I do think there's enough talent on this team and enough good aspects in the right areas by and large that I would lean 1 extra win on them.
This is one of the teams where the Chiefs, where I can't necessarily point to an area where they got better. Now, Justin Houston returning might be the only one, but I don't think their edge rush was necessarily a problem last year. I think it was still fine with D Ford in there while Houston was out. So I don't think that was necessarily a big issue. I can't point to one area where I say they got better here. And if you're not getting better in the NFL, usually injury luck strikes the opposite way. Usually something goes the opposite way and you're getting worse. So to me, 9 seems fair. I could even see it go lower, similar to I could see them taking a Bengals-esque step back in the fact that they just didn't improve anywhere, and something, like I said, injuries could strike, luck goes the other way, and all of a sudden you're not the same team you were a season ago that won 12 games. So to me, the Chiefs, one of the better regression candidates in the NFL this year.
Yeah, I think anytime a team goes aggressively after a quarterback in that first round, if they don't plan on playing the quarterback in the first round in year 1, it's tough for them to have improved in too many other areas just because so much of their resources went in doing that. Exactly. So they made a big push, obviously, for Mahomes for the future. I agree. I don't think they've actually gotten better across the board in too many areas. I think the Justin Houston returning thing could be huge, though. I mean, he is a Von Miller, Khalil Mack caliber player when he's 100% healthy. That is getting to be a much bigger caveat than it was in the past, ever getting him to that 100% healthy level. But if they do get that guy back, D Ford took a big step forward last year, but still basically only beat up on bad players. Justin Houston can beat up on pretty much every right tackle. So it does bring them something back that they didn't have last year. And
they got my boy Chris Jones, who is gonna light the world on fire this year for sure.
There you go.
Mark it down. But the receiving core worries me. I'll just say it. Outside of Travis Kelce, there is nothing that scares me in that receiving core. Obviously, they can do some creative stuff with Tyreek Hill and Anthony Thomas, but creative stuff doesn't really work in 2-minute drills. And when you need to pass, you still have to have guys who will win down the field. And I am not sure that they really have anyone at this point.
Getting rid of
Jeremy Maclin
was a real surprise.
Was that why they fired their general manager, John Dorsey? That was one of the weirdest situations. Let's talk about that for a little bit, because there have been 3 GM firings this offseason that were just beyond odd circumstances, and I just can't fathom why they would. He was good. He was legitimately good at his job, I thought. Usually that doesn't happen.
I haven't heard a particularly good reason for why they decided to part ways with him. I heard somebody say that just the length of time it took to get a couple of deals done were left out. But I mean, like, who cares? If it takes a little bit longer, if he gets the job done and everybody's happy with it, why is that a problem? I don't really get that one at all.
Yeah, and it's not like you look at his drafts, he's been hitting on picks, like I mentioned, Chris Jones, Marcus Peters. He's not really been whiffing on high-level picks. I get that, maybe Kavari Russell last year was a third-rounder and released fairly quickly, but he's hit pretty much on most of his picks over the last 3 or 4 seasons. So I obviously not in the room, don't know what's going on behind closed doors, but there had to be some sort of disagreement between him, Andy Reid, something that was going on, because legitimately, if you look around the GM and you're evaluating how they've done at their jobs, he was, I would guess, within the top 10 of just, in terms of drafting, signing free agents, and he parted ways. So that was pretty crazy to me, and we'll see how they replace him. But yeah, 9 wins to me seems about right. I could see them even going lower. So on to another team that we have at 9 wins, the Tennessee Titans. Vegas has them at 8.5. Sam, where do you got them at?
Yeah, Tennessee are interesting. They're a team I think that's definitely moving in the right direction. I know one of our analysts, Zoltan, the guy from Hungary, or the Ukraine, if you listen to Steve, is all about the Titans. Everyone's talking up Houston and their ability to win the division again. Tennessee has suddenly addressed a lot of the holes in that roster and patched over a lot of the weak areas. And granted, some of that is relying on rookie impact, but they've improved a lot of places. That's a pretty good looking roster overall. They are number 1 offensive line last season, which kind of came out of nowhere. Corey Davis should be a big upgrade at receiver. They've been looking for that number 1 guy for a while.
Well, Eric Decker too, then.
And Eric Decker coming in, being a kind of, he won't be the number 1 guy, but at least he's a proven kind of starting caliber guy that they didn't have last year, really. And the defense has kind of been adding some weapons. I think this is quietly a team that could really do well this season.
No, I definitely agree. 9 wins seems, well, they won 9 wins. They won 9 games last year. So, and they legitimately got better at multiple positions, wide receiver being the most obvious, but I think they also added in the secondary a little bit with Logan Ryan, with Adoree Jackson. There's a lot of reason to believe that this is a better team than they were a season ago. So I'm not sure where the Vegas 8.5, win total comes from, but I think this is a better roster. And 9, I don't think I'm not going to say they'll win more than 9 games, but I think at least 9 seems fair. 10 isn't out of the question, especially considering, the rest of the division.
Yeah, they have the opposite thing working for them that the Chargers had, which is that division still looks pretty ugly. So whereas the Chargers are going to be struggling to take games from their division, the Titans have all those games. They got 6 games there for the taking.
And Marcus Mariota was better from year 1 to year 2.
Yeah.
You can think about him taking at least another little step forward year 2 to year 3. There's so much to like about this roster that, I guess we both in agreement. 9 wins is even that might be a little low. So we're fans of the Titans in the AFC South. On to a team that we have projected at 8 wins, the Buffalo Bills. Vegas has them at 6, and I have to say I'm leaning towards Vegas on this one.
Yeah, we're done with the above 500
I'm done with
records.
The Bills. I'm done with the
Bills as well. Yeah, it's the opposite to our NFC rankings, where seemingly everybody was above 500. The Bills were my dark horse Super Bowl candidate last year. That didn't really work out, and if anything, it looks like it's heading in the opposite direction this time. So, I don't think this is a team that's getting to 500. I think they're going to struggle a bit this year. When we were putting, again, the roster projection stuff together, this is a team that did not have a particularly strong roster top to bottom. There's very few players of high quality that are still around and still proven. There's, granted, quite a lot of young guys that are completely unknown quantities, guys like Reggie Ragland, who didn't play at all last year. Even their defensive end, Shaq Lawson, did play, but, was injured, and who knows what we actually saw of him, how much of that is actually his potential. So there's a lot of kind of players that are question marks that could make them look a lot better than they actually, or make them better than they look. But yeah, I wouldn't hold up a huge amount of hope on it.
And to me, I don't think their offense can be schemed better than it was a season ago. I thought they utilized Tyrod Taylor in probably the absolute best possible way they could have. And, any sort of change to offense coordinator Rick Dennison is, I think, going to be somewhat of a step back. I don't think that they have, the number one rushing offense in the league next year like they did in 2016. I just don't think that they'll have, the same sort of creativity in the running game at that point. I don't think they'll have as effective a running game. So I don't think the offense probably takes a step back, and then the defense just is not anything special at this point. It wasn't very good a season ago. It was their downfall. They're aging at some important positions. Kyle Williams isn't getting any better at this point. Jerry Hughes is the same way. So, like I said, 8 wins. I'm closer to Vegas' 6 at this point.
Yeah, I think the defense has potential to be a little bit better than last year. I think we were expecting more from them last year. Granted, they've lost some significant pieces like Stephon Gilmore heading to New England. But like I said, if a guy like Reggie Ragland actually gets on the field and looks okay, if Shaq Lawson looks like a first round pick, it could be better than it's projected to be at the moment. But yeah, it's I don't see how they get to a kind of a level win total by the end of the season.
All right, one last 8-win team, and it's the Miami Dolphins. They made the playoffs last year with 10 wins. We have met 8. Vegas has them even lower, 7.5, and I think I can agree that they're a pretty strong regression candidate here in 2017.
Do you think that Jay Ajayi has the same kind of season that he had last year?
I don't think he goes as nuts in certain games, but I still think he's a 1,300-yardish running back.
I just wonder how long you can play with that kind of psychotic recklessness in terms of running the football.
That is a very good question. Because, yeah, like you said, it's psychotic reckless. It is. He is running like his hair is on fire, and that doesn't always last long.
It usually doesn't. It seems to be the kind of thing that you can only do for a couple of seasons until you just get worn down to the point where you're more going through the motions. I mean, Adrian Peterson had that early in his career. We were just like, you can't stop this guy. It takes more than one person hitting him to bring him down because he's hitting you with more violence than you're hitting him. And typically that results in him winning the contact point. And Ajayi was like that last year. He was just running through tackles, busting through guys that would take down almost any other running back in the same hit. I don't know that you can expect that to happen for that much longer, especially behind an offensive line that isn't particularly good. It's one thing if you were doing that behind the Cowboys offensive line where you knew you were getting a pretty good gain anyway. But if you're getting hit pretty early and it's all on you to make things happen, yeah, I think he's going to have a bit of a regression, albeit he'll have the whole season, so it may not kind of reflect statistically.
I will say, though, this is a fairly talented offense outside of, the quarterback position. We don't really know how Ryan Tannehill is going to recover from his ACL injury, but Devontae Parker, Kenny Stills, a wide receiver, Leonte Carew as well, and they added Julius Thomas this offseason. There's a lot of weapons. They can do a lot of things. So
they were talking about getting rid of Carew already, though, weren't they? They were talking about he may be on the roster bubble. I think so. And Devontae Parker is getting to be one of those guys where you're looking at him saying, is he actually going to make it, or is he just going to be a guy that flashes talent every now and again? Kenny Stills, did he return or did he end up somewhere else?
He's still there.
He went back. Yeah, he re-signed.
Yeah.
And he's still, as effective as he is, he's still very much a one-trick pony. So it's basically, again, going to be Jarvis Landry and friends at receiver. Him being the guy that the volume slot receiver and trying to cobble together an offense from the rest of them.
I will say also, I think the defense is a candidate to take a step back. Just Cameron Wake is getting to the age where I'm not sure he can continue to get pressure at the rate he has, especially after the Achilles injury, 35 years old. He has to slow down at some point. And I thought the secondary sort of overperformed their talent level a season ago. I'd be happy to be proven wrong, but I just don't think Byron Maxwell is anything special at the cornerback position. I think he played a little above his head last year.
Yeah, and I wasn't a huge fan of the corners that he drafted last year, Xavier Howard, yeah, in particular. So, yeah, I agree. I don't think that defense looks fantastic. I think the offense is going to be, I don't think that's going to be great either. I'm kind of with Vegas. I don't think that this is a particularly strong team. I'm not entirely sure.
And that is it for teams 500 and over. Moving on to a handful of teams that we have projected for fewer than 8 wins. First off, the Indianapolis Colts. We have them at 7. Vegas has them at 9. What are you seeing, Sam?
I'm never sure what to make of the Colts because this as a roster looks ugly, but they have Andrew Luck, who had the best year of his career last season and is one of the quarterbacks capable of dragging a bad roster to the postseason. So in terms of what they should do, it's not good. This is not a particularly good team. It's got holes everywhere. There's a lot of problems on this roster. But if they get Andrew Luck the way he was playing last year, all bets are off. You know, this is an explosive team. It's capable of putting up points quickly. It can win games that it shouldn't win. I really don't know what to make of the Colts.
No, I'm right there with you, but I do think 7 is low just with a franchise quarterback. I think when you have a guy as good as Andrew Luck is, 7 wins. I mean, they won 8 last year with a defense that was not even by pretty much every margin, it was the worst defense in the NFL. And just looking at the talent, that roster was completely bereft of talent, just awful at almost every position outside of maybe Vontae Davis. So I think even guys adding, mid-level players like Jabal Sheard, like Jonathan Simon, you're going to be better on that defense, and Malik Hooker in the secondary. I think you improve a little bit. And if you improve a little bit on defense, I don't think they need much to win 9 to 10 games with how much Andrew Luck can carry you at times throughout the season. Now, he's inconsistent and did not bring in, game after game, but he has games where he will win it all on his own because of how good he is, because of, how good the talent around him is offensively in that receiving core. I think it gets a little underrated. T.Y. Hilton and Dante Moncrief, are fairly talented wide receivers in their own right. It just is the offensive line going to give him close to enough time? That's always the question. They're solid, I think, now at left tackle, left guard, center, but the right side of the line is a big question mark still. I don't know what to make of it. I think, though, that 7 wins still seems low to me.
Well, I think the good thing from that point of view is that now it's only half a bad line, whereas before it was just a bad line. They've at least addressed the left side. So, and to be honest, I mean, as much as that sounds ridiculous and it sounds kind of like it shouldn't, it's still a problem. You can scheme to protect one side. If you want to do stuff with slide protections or just keeping a tight end and a back to that side, you can patch up one side of a line if you know it's going to be a problem. If if the entire line is the issue and you don't know where the pressure is going to come from at any given time, that's when you're screwed because there's just nothing you can do about that. If you put all your eggs to the right-hand side, the left side is going to give you the problem. You just can't fix that. But if you at least know that our right guard and our right tackle are substandard, that's where we're going to have issues. You can address that schematically. It's not going to completely paper over the cracks and you're going to still have some problems, but it's a lot better than it was when the whole line was the issue. So yeah, that could be better. I think T.Y. Hilton's still definitely a good player. Frank Gore and Moncrief are decent, not amazing, but good enough to get the job done.
I don't know about Frank Gore at this point. He is 34 years old.
He's becoming the new Thomas Jones, but he'll still get you those yards that are there, which, is valuable when you've had Trent Richardson on your roster.
He's going to move up possibly to top 5 all-time rushing attempts this year with how many he's had in his career. He's at number 10 right now.
Amazing when you consider that the knock on him coming out is that he had no knees left.
Durability.
And it was probably not going to be, it was probably not going to be, a guy that could withstand any kind of workload in the NFL. Malik Hooker is the big X factor in that defense because, I've raved plenty about how he's a guy almost uniquely capable of transforming a defense schematically and allows you to do a bunch of stuff that no other safety outside of Earl Thomas in the NFL allows you to do. it'll be interesting to see if we see that kind of impact from him as a rookie. Even if he blows some plays, if you at least see what the changes that he allows from that defense from a schematic point of view.
Can't believe you made it through that without mentioning your boy,
Henry
Anderson. Yeah.
Yeah, well, obviously Henry's going to come back. We're going to see the real Henry Anderson right now, which is a quality player. I mean, we've seen it. It's a little bit worrying how long it took him to come back from the injury and what he looked like when he did come back. But
he was still good last year. Just they limited him so much in terms of snap count.
Yeah, I mean more how little he played given the injury. It was a long time to come back, and he really didn't see the field that much. But we saw from a rookie, this is a guy that is well capable of playing at this level, and being an extremely disruptive interior player.
Agreed. We have a handful of teams with 7 wins here. On to the AFC North, where the Cincinnati Bengals we have projected at 7. Vegas has them at 8.5.
I think both might be high. I think this is a team that could take a real big step backwards. Again, with the roster stuff, this is not a good roster, and that offensive line looks like maybe the worst unit in the entire NFL on paper. They're right up there with the Seahawks offensive line. It's just, I just can't fathom that they allowed Andrew Whitworth to walk out the door after seeing what his replacements look like.
Yeah.
But at least Zeitler, I can understand that you let the guard walk away and figure that you can just patch that up because teams do that regularly. It happens. But you drafted 2 players essentially to replace Andrew Whitworth. Both have been on the field, and when they have been on the field have played abysmally. And instead of saying, okay, let's change that plan, you just go, well, all right, see you later, Andrew, and we'll figure out what to do with that later on. That's just going to go terribly.
I don't see how it can go any other way. Maybe the silver lining of the situation is Andy Dalton throughout his career, one of the quickest releases in the NFL, gets rid of the ball. A lot of RPOs, a lot of screens in that offense. So that really won't change much of that sort of stuff. But you always have to have the drop back passing off. You always have to be able to get to, throws that take 2.6 seconds, 3 seconds. And I'm not sure he's going to have that with Boyhe on one side and Jake Fisher on the other. Just from what we saw from him last year, if both of those guys were on the field last year, would not have had that sort of time. So I was completely on board for another regression for them in 2017 until they really knocked it out of the park in the draft, in my opinion. I was on board for them to be a 4 or 5 win team before they added John Ross, who I think is a perfect complement to AJ Green. And they added Jordan Willis and Carl Lawson on that defensive line, who they might now actually have some pass rush outside of Carlos Dunlap and Geno Atkins there. So I don't think 7 is too low. I don't think that's too high. I'm not saying that they're going to only win 5 or 6 games. I think 7 is about right. 7 or 8 wins is where I see this team.
I will say that they have one of the highest variances in terms of what they could be based on unknown quantities.
Yes,
from a player personnel standpoint of pretty much any team in the league. I mean, when we were saying after the draft, depending on how highly you rated some of these guys and, how highly they were graded, you could make an argument that the Bengals can deploy 6 first-round talent players for the first time in 2017 between the guys they drafted this year, between the guys from last year, guys like William Jackson at corner who missed the whole season injured, Andrew Billings as a nose tackle who missed the whole season injured, the guys they drafted this year, both in the first round, and guys like Joe Mixon, who obviously had concerns that dropped him out of the first round. You can make a case that this has 6 first round talent guys to play for the first time. And if any kind of percentage of that hits, if they go 500 on those 6 guys, that's 3 really talented players that are going to be playing that weren't playing last year. So that could immensely catapult them forward. On the other hand, if they swing and miss on almost all of them, that's a disaster because a huge amount of those guys are going to be playing.
And another really interesting storyline to me is what is Drake Kirkpatrick going to look like this season after being one of the worst cornerbacks in the NFL in 2015, improving some in 2006, improving a considerable bit in 2016 and looking actually good down the stretch the last 8 weeks of the season, then commanded a ridiculous sort of contract for the position. I think he got over $10 million a year, which really you're basing off the fact that he was a first-round pick and he had a stretch of 8 games that were good. But if that stretch of 8 games is what he is in 2017, then all of a sudden, hey, they might not be too bad in the secondary. They might have a legit secondary if William Jackson, like you said, comes in and plays like a first-rounder also. So there, like you said, high variance here. I don't know what necessarily to make of them before the draft. I was low. But now they could go anywhere from, I could see them going back to winning 12 sort of games next year if everything sort of clicks on both sides of the ball. But again, offensive line is going to be by far their biggest issue.
Yeah, they really could be anywhere on the spectrum. The thing that I keep coming back to that offensive line, I think you can win in the NFL with bad offensive lines, but it takes a certain type of quarterback in particular and offense generally to do that. I think the Seahawks are able to do it with Russell Wilson. I don't think that the Bengals will be able to with Andy Dalton.
We shall see. Last 7-win teams sticking in the AFC North. It is the Baltimore Ravens, who they might be a little surprising for the 7-win projection as Vegas has them at 9. But you look at the roster and just top to bottom, it doesn't look like a playoff caliber roster in my opinion.
No, I agree. I mean, you kind of come back to the Ravens just tend to win more than that.
Yes, and that's the thing. They just
so you look
do.
at it. Yeah, you just look at the roster and you think it really does look like that level of roster, but they're probably going to win more games somehow. I mean, the concern for them, the big concern, I think, is that Joe Flacco is now, he's gone on one of those Eli Manning-esque runs where his grade has gone down a couple of straight seasons to the point where it's really pretty bad. It's not Eli Manning levels of bad, and it hasn't been going down for as long as Eli Manning's has, but it's gone down 2 seasons in a row now, and you're wondering, are you going to see, forget the elite talk for Joe Flacco, are you going to see Joe Flacco go back to just being okay, decent, half decent? Because if he plays the level he did last year again, I mean, that's an issue. Like, that's not just something that we can make up elsewhere. That's holding the team back.
Oh, I agree. Joe Flacco is probably the biggest, let's say, wild card here in that he's going to determine their fate and how that offense runs, because I don't think the offensive line is close to the line they had a few years ago where they could line up Justin Forsett behind it and have a good running game. It might not be a great running game, but he has some weapons now offensively. He has Jeremy Maclin. He has Mike Wallace. He has Brashad Perriman. They could have a good vertical passing offense, but it remains to be seen, which Joe Flacco we're going to get in this run.
And then the defense is interesting because you got arguably the best safety tandem in the league in Eric Weddle and Tony Jefferson now. Still so much is resting on the shoulders of Terrell Suggs, a bit like the Steelers actually, in that they've got the same guy just year after year is the one guy that's able to consistently produce. They should have a better season out of Brandon Williams at nose tackle because I'm not entirely sure why there was such a big drop off for him last season. So if I can't explain it, I'm going to assume that it won't happen 2 years in a row. So there's kind of bits of this defense that look really good, but then pretty much every other place in the defense there's a problem. Like it's the stuff that's good is really good, but the stuff that isn't is a real issue.
I will say they did add Brandon Boykin, one of our favorite slot cornerbacks. Excuse me. I want to see him come back and play at a high level because of how just got sort of forgotten about he has been at multiple places throughout his career. I think he's better than the rep he gets, and they could have a good secondary if Jimmy Smith plays the level he can. If Marlon Humphrey comes in and contributes right away, I think they could have a legitimate secondary at this point.
Yep, I'm with you.
All right, on to the Houston Texans, who we have projected to take a big step backward to 6 wins this year. Vegas has them at 8.5. What do you say, Sam?
Yeah, 6 seems kind of harsh. I do agree that there's some holes in this team, but the defense could be scary. It could be good enough to carry a team with Tom Savage at quarterback, which is what could be necessary for this team. Like you're talking about Whitney Merciless and Jadeveon Clowney, who have emerged as two of the better edge rushing duos, or at least edge players, with Clowney being more kind of run focused. Then you're getting the return of JJ Watt. And, if last season has let people forget, JJ Watt is the most dominant force in the NFL. This is the guy that has the 3 highest graded interior seasons we've ever seen over the past decade. And that's despite Aaron Donald coming on and getting close to him. Watt is able to absolutely destroy offenses on his own. You add Clowney and Merciless to that. That alone should be terrifying for any offense. But the rest of the defense is in pretty good shape as well. And then really, if Tom Savage is anything beyond horrendous, that should be decent enough to get you to a 500 level. I mean, 6 wins seems pretty harsh for that level of talent.
Yeah, I think 6 wins is very harsh. I'm not sure how we came up with that, considering, like I said, they get J.J. Watt back this year, and that alone should make a pretty sizable impact on a defense that was pretty darn good a season ago. I get that they lost A.J. Boye, but I think Watt's a more valuable player than Boye is to a defense, so that should make a pretty big impact. And then, like you said, it's not hard to get better than what we saw from Brock Osweiler a season ago. I get that maybe they had some luck in terms of they weren't as good as a 9-win team was. That they weren't as good a team as the 9-win suggests a season ago. But even putting in Deshaun Watson and just going run heavy with a lot of option stuff should make them a better offense than they were in 2016.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to overstate just how bad Osweiler was. I mean, he was horrendous last season. So, even like I said, you throw Tom Savage in there, I would expect him to be a significant upgrade over Osweiler over the course of the season, just straight out of the box. I mean, if they can get anything from Deshaun Watson or any kind of improvement like that, it's a big step forward for the offense.
Yeah, I agree. I think 8.5 is fair. I could see them being anywhere from 8 to 10 is where I'd put them at. So, on to another 6-win team, and this is the one I was talking about in the AFC West, who I think will actually regress this season. It's the Denver Broncos. Vegas has them at 8.5. We say 6. I think it could even go lower than 6.
Lower than 6, even with that defensive talent?
I said it could because, one, the defensive talent is great, but they do not have a good run defense. They are very weak up the middle in terms of run defense. Last year they had the fewest amount of runs stopped for no gain or a loss in the entire NFL. And yes, I get that their cornerbacks have been fantastic, but I think you at least take a little step back from someone like Talib or Chris Harris this season. I don't think the secondary plays at that extremely high level that it did a year ago. And I don't trust any of these quarterbacks, especially behind an offensive line with Donald Stevenson at left tackle.
That does look terrifying. But they had Simeon last season. They won 9 games. I mean,
true.
I can't see them losing that many. I agree with you. There's some issues there. It's definitely not anything like the roster it was when we were talking about John Elway building a dynasty and, looking to contend year after year. There's now some very clear holes, plus the coaching change, losing Wade Phillips to see what this defense is going to look like. It's going to be interesting. Talib, I think, is the real wild card there because it's really the only season that we've seen Talib put together quality play for 16 games. We've seen him in every other year flash that ability to be a number 1 shutdown guy and go up against the best receivers in the league and, match up with them, lock horns and shut them down. But it's only happened once. And it's not just that he's only hit that level once, but the level that he tends to be at the rest of the time is nowhere near it. It's not like he just took one relatively small step forward to elite last year. The step between his baseline career and last season is huge. So I have no idea what Talib is going to look like in 2017. He could be anywhere from dominant shutdown corner again to like, starter who will cause you some problems and also have some good games. That could be, that's a real, I think, X factor in that defense.
You touched on one thing there that I want to hit on a little bit. You mentioned John Elway looked like he was building a dynasty. I get that he won a Super Bowl, but a lot of that, though, was through his work in free agency. In the draft, he really has not been hitting on a lot of early round picks. He just hasn't, his draft track record has not been good, and it's kind of been swept under the rug. I get that the very first draft there in 2011, he got Von Miller in the first round, but they had the number 2 overall pick. That one wasn't too hard of a pick to make, especially in his 2011 draft where anyone he would have selected there would have been, an all-pro player. So since then, here are his picks that he's had in the first 3 rounds. Derek Wolfe, Brock Osweiler, Ronnie Hillman, Sylvester Williams, Monty Ball, Kayvon Webster, Bradley Roby, Cody Latimer, Michael Schofield, Shane Ray, Ty Sambrailo, Jeff Horman, Paxton Lynch, Adam Gotsis, Justin Simmons. There's maybe one impact player in all of those picks that he had, and Derek Wolfe had one real season, and that was after he got juiced up that he was an impact player. The rest of those guys are kind of a lot of meh there in his picks the last 5 years.
Yeah, that's not a good sounding list, and especially they could really do with 1 or 2 of those coming good because they're in positions of need. A guy like Ty Sambrailo, if he showed anything at this point, would be a real bonus because their left tackle, like you said, at the moment is Donald Stevenson. Their right tackle, I think, is Menelik Watson at the moment with Sambrailo, I think, potentially in the mix. But Donald Stevenson earned a PFF grade of 28.2 last year, which remarkably enough is not the worst grade that a tackle has ever earned over a season, but is in the conversation at that figure. When you're talking about guys, the top players are up above 90, the good players are up above 80, and Donald Stevenson is in the 20s. That's catastrophically bad. That's, I will ruin every single game for you on offense single-handedly bad.
I think our listeners know by this point about Donald.
Yeah, but I don't know if the Broncos do. They're still starting him. You can't. You just can't. You can't roll into a season with Donald Stevenson as your left tackle without, your backup plan of having 2 left tackles on the field at all times.
That is probably their best bet of going over 6 games this year. The 6 tackle offensive line. All right, let's move on to another team we have projected at 6 wins, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Vegas has them at 6. Really, realistically, this roster should win more than 6 games, but we've said that before about the Jacksonville Jaguars roster.
Yeah, so many times. They have the opposite thing of the Ravens, where you look at them and you think, this should win some decent games, but they seem to conspire not to all the time. They always lose more. It all comes down to what the hell is Blake Bortles going to look like? Exactly. Are we going to see the guy that actually looked like he had some talent and ability and upside, or are we going to see the guy from last year whose mechanics had completely unraveled, whose poise had disappeared, just everything fell apart on him? Because if they get that guy again, they're sunk. Like you can't win with how
poorly. Yeah, exactly. You can't win with how poorly he played last year.
Yeah, but if they get the guy from the year before, he was taking big steps in the right direction. He looked legitimately like he had a really good future. If they get that guy,
yeah.
As much as you hate the Leonard Fournette pick, and I'm not wild on it either, but I can see him having a huge impact in the backfield if they get decent quarterback play from Bortles as well. He does have the ability to be that, impact year 1 ball carrier, even if you don't get much out of him in the passing game. Just the impact that those guys can have. They're able to have big rushing seasons. We're looking at guys like Allen Robinson, Allen Hurns as relatively average to above average players, but they looked fantastic 2 seasons ago when Bortles was playing well. So the whole offense could immediately be transformed just hinging off that one guy.
Yes, and defensively, really no holes on that roster. I get maybe pass rusher, maybe edge rusher. They haven't, Dante Fowler, and Yannick Ngakoue haven't been great. But, man, Malik Jackson, Calais Campbell in that interior should be wreaking havoc. Telvin Smith, Miles Jack, Paul Posluszny is a very solid linebacking core. And then A.J. Boye and Jalen Ramsey at corner could legitimately be the best cornerback duo in the NFL next season. They have a chance to be. if you mentioned the Talib thing. If he doesn't play up to that level again, I could see them being the best cornerback tandem in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you got the same kind of question mark with Bouye, just
1 year
with
stuff,
him. With him it's just a 1 year and a question mark as opposed to a career baseline of not particularly good and then 1 year and a question mark. But yeah, they've got a huge amount of talent there. I agree. I think this is, on paper, it's a pretty good looking defense. And they keep adding guys year after year in free agency, and I love almost all of the moves, and they just don't work out. I don't know why, but like I say, you look at that and you think they should win games, but somehow they always conspire to find a way not to.
We'll see. All right, on to the bottom two teams in the AFC. They have the Cleveland Browns. We have them at 4. Vegas has them at 4.5. Truthfully, I like the over on this one.
Yes. I think this Browns team doesn't actually look all that bad.
Poised for a cool 6-win season, I'll say.
And that's not even assuming huge leaps in terms of a lot of these young guys, because it's such a stupidly young team. Like, when you have 14 draft picks and then back it up with, I think they had over double digits again this year, didn't they? When you start adding that amount of rookies to a team for a couple of seasons, it's going to get very young very quickly. But that offensive line could easily become one of the best in the league very quickly. Like, left tackle, left guard, anything. Sean Coleman at right tackle is the only real question mark, and he looked okay when he played last year, albeit very limited snaps. So that could very quickly become one of, if not the best unit or offensive line in the entire league. That makes whoever is playing quarterback have an easier gig. It makes it easier for the running backs in the backfield. There are question marks at receiver. Kenny Britt should be solid. We should see more from Corey Coleman than we saw last year, where he was all banged up and injured. The defense, there are pieces in place. A lot of this is going to rely on immediate impacts from guys like Myles Garrett and Jabril Peppers at safety. But this is a team that I think could get pretty good pretty quickly.
Yeah, obviously the biggest question mark is their cornerback position still. I mean, Joe Hayden has sort of fallen off a cliff in recent years in terms of his effectiveness. Outside of him also, there's really no notable names in that secondary that have played well at any point in their career. So Jason McCourty could recapture something, but in the last few years has not been close to the guy we saw early in his career. So, yeah, a lot of question marks in the secondary, but pretty much every other position on that roster has some talent, at least. And inside linebacker, they have Jamie Collins now. They have some impact players in that front seven with Collins and Myles Garrett. So, yeah, I like them over 4, I'll just say. I like them over 4.5. I'm not calling them a contender for the playoffs at all, but 4.5 just seems far too low for what's going on in that roster right now.
Yeah, I could easily see the Browns getting to 5 or 6 wins this year. I think they've got the ability to hit that kind of level.
All right, last one. On to the New York Jets. We have them for 2 wins. Vegas has them at 5 wins. Truthfully, they're both too high.
There's no way this team wins 5 games.
2 games, either. They don't win 2. If I had to bet right now, I can
get on board at 2, but 5 is insane. There's no way.
Oh, 5 is crazy for this roster. Like, legitimately, bet your life savings on the under on that, because this is one of the least talented rosters I've seen in my 6 years of doing games at PFF. 6 years working at PFF.
The quarterback competition alone I don't care what the rest of the roster looks like. Look at your quarterback battle. Your quarterback competition is between Josh McCown, Bryce Petty, and Christian Hackenberg, who is seemingly peppering sideline reporters with more passes than he is receivers through OTAs and summer practices and that kind of thing. I mean, look.
And that's one thing behind, like we just mentioned, the Browns. The offensive line's good. The Jets have one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL as well.
Yeah, so even if one of those guys was good, it wouldn't matter, but they're not. So it's one of the worst looking offenses I've ever seen.
Yes. I honestly don't see, if I had to bet right now, I would bet that they win 1 or fewer games. And I probably would bet that if someone had the over under at 2, because they're just, I don't see how they will win games with that quarterback position, with that offense. The only good spot on the team is their defensive line, and it's not a defensive line built to rush the passer. It's a defensive line built to stop the run. So,
yeah, and even the defensive line hasn't been playing as well recently as it has in the past. I mean, the guys like Muhammad Wilkerson didn't have a great year at all. Leonard Williams played well, but we've seen better from Sheldon Richardson as well. I mean, this is just like Morris Claiborne was one of their big free agent additions. Who knows what Morris Claiborne is going to be next year? I mean, his good play, we talked about Talib. He put it together for one season, and Claiborne put it together for like 6 games, and then got injured. So we've no idea what he's going to look like next year. And again, if he goes back to his career baseline, I mean, that's bad. Like, he was a bad player for 3-4 seasons and then put together 6 games of legitimately quality play, in fairness. I'm not, talking down the good performance that he did have, but you're basically saying that the 406 snaps that he played in 2016, I'm 100% sure that we're getting that guy again 2017, despite 4 previous seasons that are nothing like that.
There's, like I said, not a lot to be excited about. And just holes at every position except for defensive line.
Just so
Sharon Peak as your starting wide receiver, as your Quincy Nunn was your number 1. I mean, it's just there's no talent offensively. Matt Forte is your starting running back.
Yeah, if you look through the PFF grades, just in player grades at the moment, the number of players that they have in the 30s, 40s, and 50s on both sides of the ball are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 players on the offense and defense that have player grades either in the 30s, 40s, or 50s. There's 2 more who are slated to start in the secondary that are rookies. They're planning on starting a rookie safety pairing, most likely. I mean, that's half a team that is either bad or completely unknown.
Mm-hmm. We've already spent too much time talking about them because it's, yeah. All right, that's it for us. That is the AFC Win Projections. Make sure to go check out the NFC ones a week ago if you have not yet. And we were still doing the promotion where if you go leave a 5-star review on the PFF podcast on iTunes, leave your Twitter handle or an email address, we will be selecting one each week to win a free PFF subscription. You can go check those out at profootballfocus.com/subscriptions. And like I said, leave your Twitter handle, leave your email. We'll get in touch with the winner from last week, and we'll announce another winner next week. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'll be back again in a week's time. Have a good one.